Hi everyone, welcome to our gearing up for the launch of Empowered by Darkness. I am Andrea Medina, your host. In this short episode, you will hear all about what you can expect from this podcast. Now, I wanted to begin by saying that I am someone that didn't and doesn't really have to this day the resources or the environment to turn my life around in the way that I have done for the past 4 years. I only really had myself and a couple of limiting factors that I think many of us listening today can relate to some extent to what I'm about to mention, because these factors, whether we notice it or not, can really keep us stuck for longer than we wish to be in a state of victimhood and blaming and disillusionment with life and with whatever aspirations we may have for the future. Now, when I talk about limiting factors, I want to let you know a little bit about me. I grew up in a Hispanic family that didn't really talk about their feelings in any case, meaning that even in situations that were pressing emotionally, meaning there was grief involved, a family member might have passed away, or we might have been witness to something that was extremely hurtful, we as a family would not kind of break face. We would still continue to be serious and even laugh it off, laugh off the intensity of the situation. And my family and me in turn, we have always been in an economically challenged situation, and survival has always been our priority. My parents are both immigrants. They have both always had factory jobs here in California that pay the minimum wage, and we live in Compton. I've lived in Compton ever since I immigrated to the United States. And if you don't know anything about Compton, obviously it doesn't necessarily live up to the stereotypes that you hear in the news or in, pop songs or wherever you might have heard about perhaps the violence that you can see in Compton or the extreme poverty. Obviously, Compton is huge, so there are parts that do show that image more than others. But where I lived, one of our biggest stresses was the lack of economic stability. And there was some added element of safety. And I think even if we weren't at the very extreme end of that spectrum of being in danger, we were in high alert a lot of the time. And I still notice myself being in high alert when I go out and I take a walk like later on in the afternoon. I have been, now that I'm older, I have worked in other cities, and I have seen how that's not a worry that a person has when they go out into the street. Being worried that they're going to get mugged or that there's going to be some kind of threat. And I have always felt that in the city that I live in. So no one in my reality really talked about growing up or even prioritized getting to know themselves, in the sense that they didn't prioritize getting to know their harmful attachments or their habits or thoughts or the past's effect on them in the present, meaning that even if they were actively doing things to harm themselves and, perhaps the choices they were making, the people they were surrounding themselves with, people in my surroundings, they didn't really question those decisions that they were making, and they didn't tie them to perhaps a traumatic past, which a lot of the people in my life growing up, they were victims of trauma. And a lot of us are victims of trauma, no matter the environment that you grew up in, because trauma does not discriminate based on environment. But we, as like this collective community, we never really looked at that. And taking the time to look at that was seen as a waste of time because of this emphasis on surviving and eventually thriving, going on to be successful and eventually leave the city. So I could never really afford, growing up, the resources that you see nowadays to prioritize self-development. And to be honest, I wouldn't even know where to look for them. So I wouldn't know where to look for like master classes, coaching, or institutes that you see nowadays. And even though today, like I know where to look for them, I wouldn't be able to afford them. So I'm currently studying to be a marriage and family therapist, but I have a job as I'm going to school that is barely keeping my single mother and I afloat. So I help support her in whatever I can in the part of a house that we rent. And meanwhile, I'm going to school. I know a lot of you listening are also students, and you understand the struggle of having to keep a job and also pursue higher education. And I know that this takes up so much of your time and your energy, and it really affects your mental health. So, and for the majority of my life, I wanted to conclude just saying that another limiting factor for me was the fact that my authentic self was really stifled by abuse going on in the home. My father was emotionally and verbally abusive, and that was something that I really had to grapple with once he abandoned the household. And it became this huge catalyst for looking within and looking at the past's impact on my present day. So this podcast space really understands how multi-layered a listener's reality is. I understand that your reality demands a lot from you, and it often places introspection on the back burner, or even as a luxury altogether. That is why you will not find Empowered by Darkness to be a space that is a medium to purchasing anything or enrolling in anything, or only really getting a taste of the actual support before you're asked to splurge on the advice that's applicable to your life. The episodes that you will hear are it. I really try to pack into them all that you'll need to kickstart your own version of inner work, which can happen successfully without requiring $1 from you. Because one thing that I will be really upfront about in all of my episodes is that there are free resources out there and advice on how to apply them. And I went about this journey of finding those resources alone, but you don't have to. You can go about your own version of self-development with people by your side. They might be strangers that are posting content like the one I'm posting in this podcast online, and you get to learn from them how you can apply it to your day-to-day. And obviously, one thing that I really emphasize in this podcast is following your inner guidance and discernment in how you are going to take advantage of these resources. Because once you start this journey, you will find that almost in every corner, there are people that have very strong opinions about how you should go about applying advice and relevant resources. But it falls on your discernment for how well you know your life. And in order to know your life well, you have to practice introspection, because you might know your life from what someone else can say about it, an external onlooker, but you really cannot place that much importance on the way someone externally views your situation, because a lot of people that make judgments about your reality from an external point of view are making them without even knowing their own reality. So they're ignorant to the things that they are doing that are unconscious and hurtful to themselves and others, but they are still making judgments about your life. And in that case, you have to really take a step back and assess what's going on for you within. That was a little bit of a tangent, but one thing I really wanted to emphasize is that it's likely that if you're listening to this podcast, you're part of the greater percentage of people that cannot afford to make the pursuit of inner development their main responsibility. So you cannot afford to go to multiple workshops or retreats. And I want to tell you that this is actually a good thing, because oftentimes the people that do get to afford these things, they get lost in the pursuit of transformation through continuously digging up their darkness. That they forget that darkness naturally comes up in our day-to-day experiences, the ones you are having, and that this podcast will hopefully help you have a higher perspective on. So here, during these episodes, you will do the foundational work of learning how to sit with yourself and observe your perceived darkness with curiosity, which is, quite frankly, not an easy feat, even for the person that has had the means to obtain external support on their journey. And I believe that once you tune in to you for the first time, and not the anxiety of the problem you want to fix or the anticipation for what you wish to attain as a result of healing, you can continuously come back to this ground level of self-knowledge, and you can work with what's available to you in order to continue evolving through the challenges that are assured in our day-to-day. And I will say one more thing. The goal of this space, of this podcast space, is not external focused, meaning that I won't share with you ways to attract a desired person or a thing or experience into your life, but I will place you and your relationship with yourself at the forefront. And I can assure you that this is the most effective way to bring into your life all of those things that you desire, because it is very perfectly fine and admirable that you desire more for yourself. But it is once you prioritize you and observing you internally that you will start seeing your external reality shift. And perhaps not in the ways that you think will benefit you, but in the ways that your expanding inner dialogue and environment need to feel safe and to exist in honest expression and love. So this podcast, I hope, will soften the darkness that you might see come up when you look within. And I hope it will invite you to tune into the wealth of wisdom and self-realization that is stored among the parts of ourselves that we may have never had someone to explore with. In that way, what we do here is we actually descend in order to ascend. So we first go within and deep into those parts of us that are ugly and that emerge, that lead to the emerging of uncomfortable emotions, for us to be able to ascend into a space of inner peace and inner power. Now, the format of the podcast is one that kind of alternates between shorter and longer episodes. And the reason why I wanted this alternation is because I like the versatility of being able to listen to an episode for a longer period of time, but also having one that you can listen to and gain some food for thought that isn't so long, and you can, pop on perhaps while you're doing the dishes or laundry, and you can take something from in less than 30 minutes. But I know that I love listening to my podcast when I'm driving, and usually I need for the podcast episode to be over 30 minutes. And I like having that versatility, and I hope that you will too. Now, the episodes on this podcast are uploaded biweekly, so every 2 weeks. And I am very excited to come on here and talk about these topics that I will be listing in the very first episode that you will be hearing next week, because these episodes I have crafted with my best intention to help you begin unearthing the greatness that is within you, that is often found intermingled with the parts of you that may feel extremely uncomfortable and difficult to observe, but together I hope that we will observe them with empathy and with a clear vision for where we want our lives to head from this day forward. Thank you, and I hope to see you here in a week. Bye. Love you.